Julie Pluck came out and said right after last week's episode that for sure Elijah drank the actual toast. And yet it kind of appeared the way you portrayed it. He didn't actually drink, he just pretended to drink. You want to explain
Look,
that?
one thing you got to know about, I'm a giant diva. And at the best of times, I'll always try and create some question mark or whatever. I think that when I was doing that, I was thinking, it's just always nice for them to be able to have the sense of suspicion. And look, that's in the editor's hands. I did one like that. I did one where I was gulping it down. I kind of just wanted to create, something enigmatic.
Left us all wondering.
It's left me wondering too, because it also creates an opportunity. You see, the actors don't know anything from week to week, so they really do keep us in the dark. So I mean, they could go down that road. Like, I don't know. I know as much about my future really as you guys do. I'm usually about a week ahead. That's not much.
Well, since none of us have seen this episode, can you tease this episode, All My Children, for our readers and for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the key thing about this forthcoming episode is really just the unity between the siblings is they're going to have to dispense with any of their sort of old differences in order to sort of overcome their mother. That's really the teaser.
Well, we've seen Elijah's relationship with Klaus. What is his relationship with Finn and Cole, the newly awake brothers?
Again, I just need to say, I don't know much, and people sort of appear. It's really strange for me because suddenly an actor appears on set and you're like, oh, that's who I've been talking about, and you don't know it quite often until they arrive, For example, I was saying things like, you better look out, you'll have Cole to deal with. When I was doing that thing with Klaus on the coffin and he removes the dagger from me, I said, you'll have Cole to deal with. I hadn't met Cole at that point. Cole wasn't even in the coffin. I didn't know. Oh, wait a second, was he? I don't think he was. I don't believe I'd met him when I was doing these lines. So it was, or I think I'd seen an image of him. And in my mind, like Cole was, and I actually think that, Nathan's tremendous, but in my mind, the way we were describing him, he was, this Leviathan, this monster. I was like, what is he going to be? Like, it's going to be this kind of ogre, because there was so much talk of, the threat of him. So, my relationship with them, to get back to the question, is kind of what we guess it is, kind of just before it happens. And you gotta, you have to be on your toes.
Can you talk about Elijah and Elena's relationship?
Sure. Look, Nina Dobrev and I just like working with each other. I think a lot of people just read into that as kind of, and maybe we're a little too flirty with each other, and it just ends up in what we're doing. That's all that is. I think we just, look, I really enjoy working with Ian Somerhalder. Not so flirty with Ian, but definitely with Nina. It's all, and I think that people are just sort of reading that. I don't know. I like that relationship. I'm just going to now reveal some of the worst, spikiest, terrible hair in the world, which is too hot in here for this. The thing about she and I that I think there's some sort of unsaid thing that's happening, which I like. It's sort of like this, it sounds pretentious, but it's kind of like a spiritual romance, I think, that they both kind of aspire to the same qualities in a person that perhaps, I don't know, I think that Elijah's certainly enchanted by a nobility that she's able to uphold and that he aspires to.
And kind of going off of that, if not Elena, will there be a love interest for Elijah at some point? Or are you hoping?
I mean, I think Elijah's almost more business before relationships. There's something kind of the consigliere about him. He reminds me of Robert Duvall in Godfather. Except way more menacing. But I mean, that's just the nature of his character. But I see him as he's sort of duty before women, although every time I've had an opportunity to play him as being beguiled by a woman, I have, because it's just another layer. It's interesting, That's why it's fun to go into the flashback stuff, because there's a greater sense of vulnerability that you can play with them.
What will it do to him when he finds out what his mother is planning for her kids?
It'll destroy him, I'd imagine, but he has to do. anything he can in order to survive. And I think his loyalty is probably greater to Klaus at this stage than and his siblings, even through all of the betrayals and everything, than to his mother, who's basically been extinct for most of his existence. I mean, it's almost a pipe dream to have a kind of, to have them all together, including their mother, once he learns that of that betrayal.
Elijah is the most moral of the originals, and he's the one that gave Esther and Elena pause, because there's no way to save him, as far as we know, although it's Vampire Diaries, so there's probably all sorts of twists on the spell. How is that going to play out? Are people perhaps going to not put the spell in motion because of Elijah?
I don't understand your question. Could you clarify that?
Well, that was basically the one thing that Elena seemed a little reluctant about going forward with the plan last week, was that Elijah would end up dying along with Klaus and the rest of them. Is he going to be what sort of stops perhaps Esther from going forward with the plan to extinguish
Well, I mean,
her
it seems like she
children?
proceeded. I mean, at the end of that episode, there was a lot of special effecty stuff and blood running into different rooms and slow motion shots of some very glamorous looking vampires and me. It looks to me like the wheels are sort of in motion. I mean, yeah, he's going to have to stop that. I mean, I don't think I quite know what the question is.
Well, is there a timeline for how long this spell is going to, or this process of trying to get rid of the kids, how many episodes this is going to take over?
I know as much as you do. What's been insinuated so far is that they're bound together in life and death at this point. That's all I know.
What has been your reaction to the huge fan following that Elijah has gotten and you have gotten, especially on Twitter?
I'm so grateful for it. It's like I've never really had a character like this before. My response to it is I'm extremely flattered. It's just it's what you sort of would hope for. Whenever you undertake a role. I had no idea that he would have the effect he did. I was saying something to a journalist the other day about. I think that he sort of appeals to this classical idea of a vampire, and God knows we are inundated with vampires right now. Like, we're just submerged. That everywhere we look, we see vampires. And now Hunger Games is going to come along and eclipse all of this. Thank goodness, to an extent, because it'll actually make the vampire thing a little bit kind of more, like of its own little club over to the side. But what's interesting to me is I think that he appeals to this kind of this older idea, this older mythology, this older motif of what a vampire actually is. I think that that's something that Elijah represents. I don't know, I could be guessing, because I have had time to look at it and really think about why are they responding so sort of universally positive? Unless I'm naive and people hate him, and I'm just not hearing any of that, because it could be. But for some reason, I think that he does represent something that sort of Bram Stoker tried to create originally. There's some sort and especially when he's with Nina, I think that that's what also makes those scenes fun, is that they have a sort of an ancient quality to them. Within the context of the show, it's the doppelganger and Elijah and his much younger self. But in this, but in a greater sense, like just with sort of popular culture, I think that something's resonating that looks like the older vampire and the maiden. I don't know. I think it's such a long-winded and convoluted response to your question. What's my response to why he's popular? It mystifies me, is the short answer to that, but I'm very flattered.
Do you know how many of the last batch of episodes you're actually in for the season? Are you in all of them?
I can't say.
Julie last week mentioned that there's going to be an upcoming flashback episode that takes place around 1912. Can you talk about what Elijah's doing that day?
No.
Is he eating Downtown Abbey or anything?
I can't talk about what he's doing. No. Sorry, I don't mean to be brutal.
That's okay.
I just can't. And truthfully, I get the scripts. It's no lie. We get it in the minutes before they happen. We sometimes know vaguely what's going to happen, like 2 or 3 weeks in advance. We get sort of told things, but I never sort of I never take those on because they don't exist for much longer.
And Elijah does have an interesting sort of fragile alliance with the Salvatore brothers. Can you
Yes.
preview or discuss that, where that's headed?
Yeah, I love you. That's a lovely phrase. I'm going to steal that. The fragile alliance. That's so pretty. The thing about, I think he just hopes that Elena's safe at this point, and I think that he'll do anything he can to maintain that. And I don't think that he knows that nobody will do that better than those boys, even though they are knuckleheads.
We haven't really seen Elijah drink from anyone. He just rips out hearts. Why do you think that is? And are we going to?
I don't
see
know,
him
and
drink from
I'm
anyone?
eager to see why it's revealed. It was really cool, actually. This is a testament to how awesome Julie Plec is. A few weeks ago, I had a scene which I won't tell you which one it was, but there was a scene where Elijah was going to flare up and vamp up and the full thing. As soon as you get cast as any of these vampires, they fit you straight away with all your things. And, so you're ready to go when they need you to be ready to go. And this is how cool Julie is. I called her and said, hey, or I wrote to her and said, hey, just so you know, there seems to be this sort of growing faction of fans who are fascinated by the fact that he hasn't fed and that we haven't seen him sort of vamp up. And I just want to offer to you as the storyteller, because it's your domain and not mine, maybe you want to hold on to that mystery, maybe you want to keep that up your sleeve. And she hadn't really, because she's got a million things to think about, had kind of considered, but hadn't really thought about it in a broader sense. And she was just awesome. She just said, yeah, actually, I do want to hang on to that. I want to hang on to that. So your guess is as good as mine at this point as to what it might be. I have an idea, and Julie has some ideas that she's discussed with me, but until they're set in stone, I can't say.
Where do you think it derives from that Elijah feels like he's the protector of his family? He's their biggest champion. He wants to kind of ascertain if there's any threat against them, or even against Elena. He's like this self-appointed, I'm going to champion everyone kind of person.
That's such an interesting question. I mean, I think that, look, he's probably always felt like his brother was chosen, because of this sort of birthright thing and this hybrid aspect or whatever, this hybrid aspect of Klaus. And I think that when you have somebody near you that's sort of destined for something like that, I personally in my own life assume that role. I can understand his desire to be a servant at that point to something that's greater than him, because it's not his birthright. It comes from another time too. I think there must be a sense of him that feels like Klaus is chosen, or at least he felt that once upon a time. And maybe when he felt that Klaus could maintain some degree of nobility, he probably thought that they could do something incredible together. And yet saying that, here I go wandering again. I don't think, Elijah's no innocent. He aspires to morality, but he's vicious. I think there was real power in making sure that his brother, making sure that his brother, the prophecy regarding him was sort of fulfilled. And I think that serving that is in his best interest. For all intents and purposes, they're these clandestine kings.
It's like a religious calling for him.
Yeah, I wonder what Elijah thinks of religions. I'm sure he's seen many rise and crumble during his time. I certainly think that it's his, it's a spiritual calling.
So do you think we'll see kind of less of that code of honor throughout the season and more of that viciousness, or do you think Elijah will keep that code of honor pretty high?
He's always going to try for this honor thing. I think that people were more interested in him when he was just a threat, to be honest with you. And Julie Plec probably disagree with me on that one. I think that the reason he was interesting when he first entered, and we've sort of maintained that a little bit, not so much anymore, but is that it felt like people were in trouble when he was around. And I liked that feeling. I liked that thing about Elijah. I liked that he was written a bit more brutal. I think that people like to tell themselves, oh, it's this nobility and stuff that makes us interested in him. And maybe it's the reason he was able to stick around, for sure. And so for that, in that sense, I'm not ungrateful at all. I do think, though, that he did represent threat. And I think that creates great drama, and people enjoy that. People really are like, okay, there's something that could tear the kingdom down.
Will Elijah still be so loyal to Elena once he finds out her role in his mother's plan?
I doubt it. But then again, he's able to forgive Klaus for some atrocities, and I think that if he thinks people are doing things in their best interest, then he's probably relatively forgiving. We just have to see.
What do you think Elijah wants? What's his ultimate desire in life at this point?
A family unity, yeah, and actually living in such a way that doesn't impede the existence of anybody else. I think that he wants certain basic things too. I think that he wants wealth and power, to be honest. But he wants his family to be functioning and discreetly in the world, however much they might be earning and doing.
It seems like he's really drawn to human women, and he doesn't seem to really care for vampire women. When Catherine was first turned, he seemed to lose complete interest in her.
Yeah,
do you think that's a preference he carries?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. It's a beautiful shooting star, like a life, and which most of us are oblivious to anyway. I think that's the whole fascination with vampires at the core of it. People are fascinated by this immortality, and little girls especially love the immortality of pretty-looking men. But it's interesting though that not just little girls, but life being finite is special, and for whatever reason, like the curse of being a human being is that we are unable to see it. We don't appreciate it. We don't look at it. Very few men and women throughout history really kind of live in constant awareness that it's special, and the rest of us don't. I think that's kind of what our fascination with this is, and I can understand that somebody who has this, deified quality is able to look at somebody who flickers through life and to be able to see them actually aspiring to something that it's probably taken him 100 lifetimes to not be able to master, and suddenly there's someone like Elena doing and saying things that most people never, people that he's seen live for 1,000 years can't achieve. I think that's really got to be really attractive.
Given how much potential for conflict there is in Elijah's life with practically everyone, is there someone that you personally want to see him get into it with?
I think my desires are pretty irrelevant, but let's talk about some irrelevancies. I think it would be really neat. I always kind of want to see the adult version of this show. I think and I said it like 10 times in different things. I'm not trying to plant the seeds, but I would in a heartbeat. I'd do anything that Julie wanted to go and do. First of all, but if she and Kevin wanted to go and make something a little more adult, with these characters, that would be really exciting to me. And so that sort of course, has all the ramifications of I do like the idea of getting him closer to this idea that we were talking about before, about them operating discreetly within a contemporary world. I do like the idea of them being somewhere like New York, just because I want to shoot there. Somewhere like New York and operating out of there and kind of being, almost mafia-like. That to me is a really exciting idea, of trying to maintain this sort of secrecy of their condition, but also kind of trying to satiate this desire for power, which they all seem to have.
How did you mention that Elijah came on menacing and has become sort of more humanized, and that's happened with a lot of the characters on the show, starting with Damon and even now last week with Klaus. You know, he's the most evil vampire hybrid ever, but he also draws horses. How do you keep the balance going, and is there going to be someone who comes in to be even more menacing now that you guys have gotten nicer?
That's an interesting question. I can't answer that. You know, I do think that I think it's kind of cultural. I think the United States here, I've noticed that people are very afraid. They call people good guys and bad guys, and really, really frequently, and I don't think that that's what people are. I think that they're much more complex and interesting than that. But I do think that it's a fear of not, you know, that and I understand it. You know, for Julie and Kevin building a show like this, you got to be careful that you don't go too heavily in one direction. You know, possibly. I don't know. I've never written a show like this. I sometimes think though that people can be too guarded about like thinking, okay, well if he's too evil, then nobody's going to like him. I've seen the opposite of that happen. You know, so I don't really know sort of what's correct, but I do think that in order to sort of integrate a character into like a folklore, sooner or later you do have to humanize them, which I think is Julie and Kevin's great skill, is that is that they have to humanize them, and that means exposing aspects of them that aren't necessarily in one given direction. I'm boring, aren't I?
No, it's interesting.
I'm falling asleep listening to me. So how do you...
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
But you were talking about making it a more adult show. Is there anything else? I mean, you seem like you're up on your vampire stuff. Is there any other show that you feel like counts as being human, or is there something that you think would be that fantasy of a more adult?
That's an interesting question. Are you typing this as fast as I'm talking? Can you do that?
Yeah.
That's so special. A special skill? Let's give it up for that. Let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a Breaking Bad version of this show. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see it shot more like Friday Night Lights, you know. But who the hell am I? I'm an actor in the thing. You know, it's not my show. And you might lose your demographic. I mean, you're going to if you go in that direction, because you're going to gain a whole other one. But it might be smaller and not as profitable.
You mentioned that the originals seem to want to be putting down roots and establishing Mystic Falls kind of as their home, so they can live there in peace and harmony with everybody. Yet there's a serial killer kind of on the loose who's been in Elena's house and attacked somebody close to Elena. Don't you think that they want to kind of clean up their own backyard at some point?
But you mean the members of the community?
Well, no, for the originals. If they're going to settle down here, they should care about the quality of the people that are amongst them.
All right.
And who's posing threats to the doppelganger and to anybody else they care about.
Well, then that gives birth to another question: is do you think that the originals are aware who this wandering menace is?
I don't think they have to know. They should feel like somebody's intruding on their territory. They should want to protect what they have.
But how do you know that it's not one of them?
Oh, this is an interesting question.
Now, the originals, after they've been undaggered, after in some cases being locked in a coffin for hundreds of years, they really seem to adjust to modern times very quickly. Is that a specific quality of being an original, or is that just something we just sort of go with on the show?
Look, if you were to adhere to what would be correct, which I always find so ridiculous. Like sometimes you literally will be talking to writers here, and they'll be saying, yeah, actually what we did was, traditionally people were called if the name was this, you'd become the Michelsons because you're the son of Michael, and this is what, and you're talking about historical accuracy. Meanwhile, my inner monologue is saying, if we were doing this for historical accuracy, when the mother emerges, she wouldn't even be able to speak any language that we would be able to identify in any way, shape, or form. Do you know what I mean? Like it would be some kind of Gaelic, that would be, I don't know what you're saying. You sound like Beowulf right now. So I mean, it's a balancing act. This is a show. It's fun, and it kind of, you have to, if this is even a word, contemporize. Can I say that? you have to sort of contemporize these creatures sort of immediately. I'd also been off, you know, you're talking like earlier, there's big talk online for some reason about my haircut, you know, which to me seems obscene and redundant. Please do not put images of me online of this, by the way, with my terrible hat hair. But no, it's interesting. Like, there was so much talk about, did he have a haircut in the coffin? I remember thinking, how do you get haircut from coffin? Like, because I had the scene, and then in the, you know, where I have my former hair or whatever, and then I, you know, emerge with a new haircut or whatever. I mean, that's not the biggest example of it. I mean, you know, Casper Zephyr playing Finn, you know, like he comes out looking like something, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean or something, and then in the next scene he's like very modern. I mean, you have to do that. You have to imagine that they've been schooled, and frankly, you know, a training montage of getting somebody to look and feel modern would be very dull to our viewers. So,
it's gonna be hilarious.
I actually do. I think so too. But it's more of a Funny or Die thing or YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should make that.
Can you talk about your relationship with Rebecca and how that might develop?
I love that actress. I love Claire Holt. I love. They actually seem to be. She seems to be a little more megalomaniacal than perhaps I originally thought she was going to be, because she's definitely drawn to Klaus's will and Klaus's intention and doing what he says. She's a lot more beholden to him, and I think feels a lot less. Not so much anymore. She's growing as impatient and disgusted with him as it seems Elijah is. But certainly when she first emerged on the show, she was. You know, she looked like she was more inclined to go the Klaus way of things, and I think that she's certainly got a temper. I don't know if she's certainly not as patient as Elijah was, but there is something sort of special there. I'm surprised that they haven't done more with them, but I guess that's in between Elijah and Rebecca. But I'm sure that'll be in the pipeline.